The encounter. The night was calm, almost too quiet for Jake Miller's liking. He was in his small garage at the edge of town, tinkering with an old motorcycle. The hum of crickets outside and the soft glow of his desk lamp made the perfect backdrop for his thoughts. Life hadn't been kind to Jake. Once a starry-eyed dreamer, now he was just a mechanic trying to make ends meet, one busted engine at a time. He wiped the grease off his hands and stared at the bike in frustration. "One more problem I don't know how to fix," he muttered. Suddenly, a bright flash lit up the night sky. It was so intense that it turned night into day for a few seconds. Jake shielded his eyes and stumbled outside, his heart pounding. A streak of light zipped across the heavens, leaving a fiery trail behind it. The object crashed into the woods nearby, sending a tremor through the ground that Jake felt in his chest. "What the hell was that?" he whispered to himself. Curiosity got the better of him. Grabbing a flashlight, Jake set off toward the woods. The air smelled like burning metal and something else, something he couldn't quite place. His boots crunched against the forest floor as he followed the trail of broken branches and scorched leaves. As he approached the crash site, the scene became otherworldly. Trees were bent backward as if an invisible force had pushed them aside. The ground was blackened and steaming. At the center of it all was what looked like a glowing orb, pulsating with a soft blue light. Jake's breath caught in his throat. "This isn't a meteor," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The orb cracked open with a hiss, and a faint mist escaped. Jake took a cautious step back. His instincts told him to run, but his legs refused to move. From the orb emerged a figure, and Jake's world tilted. It was a girl, or at least, she looked like one. Her skin shimmered like polished silver, and her eyes glowed a deep violet. She was taller than any human he'd ever seen, and her movements were graceful, almost floating. Her hair, a cascade of white and blue strands, seemed to defy gravity. For a moment, neither spoke. Jake's mind raced with questions. Who, or what, was she? Why was she here? The girl tilted her head and looked directly at him. "You are Jake Miller," she said, her voice melodic but firm. Jake froze. "How do you know my name?" "I came for you," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "You? What?" Jake's voice cracked. He felt like he was in a bad sci-fi movie. "Look, I don't know who you are, but you've got the wrong guy." The girl took a step forward, her gaze steady. "I am Lyria," she said. "I am from a world far beyond yours. And no, I do not have the wrong person. I chose you." Jake blinked. "Chose me for what?" "Lady, I think you hit your head in that crash or whatever." Before he could finish, Lyria raised her hand, and the orb behind her floated into the air, its pieces reassembling as if by magic. Jake stared in disbelief. "I am not injured," Lyria said. "And I do not make mistakes. You are the one I have been searching for." Jake's instincts screamed at him to back away, but something about her tone kept him rooted in place. "Why me?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Lyria hesitated for the first time, her violet eyes softening. "Because your world needs you, and so does mine." Jake opened his mouth to argue, but a rustling sound from behind him made him whirl around. Flashlights cut through the darkness, and voices shouted orders. "Spread out. The crash site is up ahead." "Great," Jake muttered. "Now what?" Lyria's expression turned serious. "They cannot take me. If they do, it will be the end of everything." Jake looked at her, then back at the approaching lights. "You've got to be kidding me. Who are these people?" "Humans," Lyria said, her voice tinged with disdain. "But not like you. They work for forces that seek to destroy, not protect." Jake didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was just a mechanic, and now he was standing in the middle of a forest with an alien girl, being hunted by what sounded like a secret government task force. "Fine," he said, surprising himself. "Let's go." Lyria nodded, and they darted into the shadows just as the agents arrived. Jake led her through the woods, his heart pounding louder with every step. He had no idea what he'd just gotten himself into, but one thing was clear: his life would never be the same. As they ran, Lyria spoke again. "You must trust me, Jake. I chose you for a reason. Your courage will determine the fate of more than just your world." Jake glanced at her, disbelief written all over his face. "Lady, I'm just a mechanic." "You are more than you think," Lyria replied. For the first time, Jake wondered if she might be right. The escape. Jake's chest heaved as he and Lyria sprinted through the dense forest, dodging branches and jumping over fallen logs. Behind them, the agents' voices grew louder, punctuated by the sharp barks of trained dogs. Flashlights sliced through the darkness like searching eyes, sweeping dangerously close to their path. "Who are these people?" Jake asked, his voice a harsh whisper. "They're called the Wardens," Lyria replied, her voice calm despite the chaos. "They are a secret faction on your planet, hunting beings like me. To them, I am not a person. I am a prize." "A prize?" Jake glanced back over his shoulder, spotting the agents closing in. "Why don't you just use your alien powers or something? Make them disappear." "It's not that simple," Lyria said, her tone laced with frustration. "My abilities are limited here. This world's atmosphere weakens me. For now, we run." Jake clenched his jaw. This night was spiraling into madness. One moment, he was fixing a rusty motorcycle, and now he was running for his life with an alien girl claiming he was her chosen one. It sounded ridiculous even in his own head. Ahead, the forest thinned, revealing a clearing bathed in moonlight. Jake's heart sank when he saw it. A dead end. A steep cliff dropped off into a rocky gorge, with a river roaring far below. "We're trapped," Jake said, spinning around. Lyria stepped forward, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Trust me," she said. "Trust you. We're about to be caught, and you're telling me to." Before Jake could finish, Lyria reached out and grabbed his hand. A surge of warmth spread through him, and suddenly the air around them shimmered. Jake's surroundings blurred, the forest dissolving into a swirl of light and sound. "What's happening?" Jake shouted, his voice trembling. "Hold on," Lyria said, her grip tightening. In an instant, they reappeared on the other side of the gorge. Jake stumbled, his legs shaky from the sudden teleportation. He bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. That was insane," he said, staring at Lyria in disbelief. She didn't respond. Her silver skin had dimmed, and she looked unsteady. Jake realized the teleportation had taken a toll on her. "Are you okay?" he asked, surprised by the concern in his voice. "I'll recover," Lyria said, straightening up. "But we must keep moving. They will not stop." As if on cue, the distant hum of drones filled the air. Jake looked up and saw 3 small machines hovering across the gorge, their red lights scanning the ground. "They're relentless," Lyria muttered, her voice edged with frustration. Jake's mind raced. "I know a place we can hide," he said. "Follow me." The two of them trekked deeper into the forest, avoiding the drones and staying off the main paths. Jake led Lyria to an old, abandoned cabin hidden among the trees. The roof was caving in, and vines crawled up the walls, but it was secluded and shielded from the sky. "This is where I used to come when I needed to get away," Jake said as they slipped inside. "No one knows about it." Lyria nodded, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "It will do, for now." Jake lit a small lantern, the soft glow illuminating the dusty interior. "Now, care to explain what's really going on?" he asked, crossing his arms. Lyria hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "You deserve answers," she said. "But first, you must understand that the truth will change everything for you." "Yeah, well, my light's already upside down, so spill it," Jake said. Lyria sighed. "On my world, I am what you might call a guardian. I possess a rare energy that can heal, protect, and create. This energy is coveted by many, including the Toreth, a race of conquerors who seek to destroy my people and claim my abilities for themselves. Jake frowned. Okay, but what does that have to do with me? Lyria stepped closer, her glowing eyes meeting his. Your name appeared in an ancient prophecy. It spoke of a human who would rise above their flaws to become a beacon of hope. I searched countless worlds to find you. Jake laughed bitterly. You've got the wrong guy. I'm no hero. I'm just a mechanic trying to get by. Lyria shook her head. You are more than you realize, Jake. The wardens know this. They'd been tracking me for years, waiting for the moment I would find you. If they capture me, they will use my energy to unleash destruction, not just on my world, but on yours. Jake ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. This is insane. I don't even know you, and now you're telling me I'm part of some prophecy. You've got to give me a reason to believe you. Lyria reached out and placed a hand on his chest. A soft warmth spread through him, and suddenly, images flooded his mind. Visions of her world, beautiful and vibrant, now ravaged by war. He saw the Xoreth, monstrous and merciless, tearing through cities. And he saw himself, standing beside Lyria, wielding a strange light that pushed the darkness back. The vision ended as quickly as it began, leaving Jake breathless. I don't know how or why, Lyria said softly, but you are connected to this fight. You are the key. Before Jake could respond, a loud crash echoed outside. The wardens had found them. Looks like I don't have a choice, Jake said, grabbing a rusty crowbar from the corner. Ready? Lyria asked, her voice steady despite the danger. Jake nodded, adrenaline surging through him. Let's do this. Secrets of the prophecy. The cabin was in ruins. Jake leaned against the wall, catching his breath, his crowbar slick with sweat and dirt. The wardens had retreated for now, but they had left behind a clear message. They would return. Outside, drones buzzed faintly in the distance, a haunting reminder that this wasn't over. Lyria sat cross-legged on the floor, her glowing skin dimmer than before. She looked drained, her hands trembling slightly as she closed her eyes and whispered alien words that Jake couldn't understand. A soft blue light emanated from her, flickering like a dying flame. What are you doing? Jake asked, his voice breaking the tense silence. Replenishing my energy, Lyria said, her voice faint but steady. Your atmosphere is toxic to me. I need time to recover. Jake frowned. Toxic? You mean Earth is killing you? Not immediately, Lyria said, opening her eyes. But it weakens me. My abilities rely on harmony with my surroundings. Your planet's air is chaotic. It saps my strength. Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. Great. So not only are we being hunted by some secret government goons, but you're also dying slowly. Perfect. Lyria gave him a small, tired smile. Your sarcasm is noted, Jake. He sank onto an overturned crate, his head in his hands. This is insane. I mean, I'm just a guy. Why would some alien prophecy pick me? There's nothing special about me. Lyria's gaze softened. That's where you're wrong. Jake looked up, his expression skeptical. Oh, really? Enlighten me. Lyria took a deep breath, steadying herself. On my world, there's a legend. It speaks of a time when the Xoreth would rise, threatening to destroy not only my people but the balance of life across the universe. In our darkest hour, a being from another world would emerge, a human, flawed but courageous, who would stand with us and turn the tide. Jake chuckled bitterly. Flawed but courageous sounds like a polite way of saying I'm a mess. Lyria ignored his sarcasm. Your name appeared in the prophecy, written in the ancient language of my ancestors. I didn't believe it at first. Why would a human from a distant planet matter to us? But the more I searched, the clearer it became. You are meant to play a part in this, Jake, whether you believe it or not. Jake stared at her, his mind racing. How can my name be in some alien prophecy? That doesn't make any sense. Lyria hesitated, her expression clouded. That, I do not know. The prophecy is older than my civilization, but it has never been wrong. Jake stood up, pacing the small cabin. So let me get this straight. You think I'm some kind of chosen one, destined to save your world. And mine, from a race of alien conquerors. Yes, Lyria said simply. Jake stopped and turned to her, frustration boiling over. Why me? Why not someone smarter? Or stronger? I'm just a mechanic. I fix engines. I'm nobody. Lyria rose to her feet, her glowing eyes locking onto his. You are not nobody, Jake. The prophecy didn't choose you for your skills or your past. It chose you for your potential, for what you could become. Jake opened his mouth to argue, but the sound of approaching footsteps cut him off. They're here, Lyria said, her voice tense. Jake grabbed his crowbar, his heart pounding. We can't keep running forever. No, Lyria agreed, but we don't have to. She closed her eyes, and the air around her shimmered with energy. The blue light that had been flickering earlier now burned brighter, illuminating the room. Jake watched in awe as symbols appeared in the air, swirling around her like a living hologram. What are you doing? Jake asked. Unlocking the truth, Lyria said, her voice layered with power. The symbols merged into a single beam of light that shot toward Jake, striking him in the chest. He stumbled back, gasping as a flood of images filled his mind. He saw a vast alien city, its towers gleaming under twin suns. He saw the Xoreth, monstrous creatures with razor-sharp limbs and glowing red eyes, tearing through the streets. He saw Lyria standing against them, her hands glowing with energy as she fought to protect her people. And then he saw himself, leading a charge, wielding a weapon made of light, his voice rallying both humans and aliens to fight together. The vision ended as suddenly as it began, leaving Jake breathless. What was that? He asked, clutching his chest. The truth, Lyria said. You have the potential to unite worlds, Jake, to inspire hope where there is none. Jake shook his head, his mind reeling. I'm just one guy. How am I supposed to do all that? You won't be alone, Lyria said. I will stand with you. And there are others, beings across the galaxy who will join us, if we can reach them. But first, we must escape the Wardens and find my ship. It holds the key to defeating the Xoreth. Before Jake could respond, the cabin door burst open, and the Wardens stormed in. Get down, Jake shouted, throwing himself at Lyria as bullets ricocheted off the walls. Lyria's hands glowed once more, and a shield of energy enveloped them. The Warden's bullets dissolved harmlessly against it, but Jake could see the strain on her face. We can't hold them off forever, he said. Then we won't, Lyria replied. She reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a small device. Pressing it, she whispered, Hold on, Jake. The world around them shimmered again, and in a flash of light, they were gone, leaving the Wardens staring at an empty cabin. Betrayal and revelation. The world reassembled itself in a dizzying blur of colors. Jake staggered, barely managing to stay upright as the sensation of teleportation left his body tingling. When his vision cleared, he found himself in a cavernous underground structure. The walls were sleek, metallic, and covered in glowing alien symbols that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Where are we? Jake asked, his voice echoing in the vast space. A sanctuary, Lyria said, though her tone carried little relief. She leaned heavily against a wall, her silver skin dim, and her breathing labored. Jake scanned their surroundings, uneasy. The room was vast but felt stifling. This doesn't look like Earth. It's not, Lyria confirmed. We're in a hidden outpost created by my people centuries ago, a safe haven for emergencies. Jake frowned. Why does it feel like we're sitting ducks in a sci-fi horror movie? Before Lyria could answer, a voice rang out. A deep, commanding tone. "You're not as safe here as you think." Jake spun around, instinctively raising his crowbar, but what he saw made him freeze. A man in a dark uniform stepped out from the shadows. He was tall and imposing, his face weathered but sharp, with a glint of cold intelligence in his eyes. "Who the hell are you?" Jake demanded. The man smirked. "Captain Ezra Ward, leader of the Wardens, and the man who's been tracking your friend here for years." Jake's heart sank. "How did you find this place?" Ezra interrupted, stepping closer. "We've known about these outposts for a long time. Your alien friend isn't as clever as she thinks." Jake glanced at Lyria, whose face had turned grim. "You betrayed us," she said softly, her voice laced with both anger and disappointment. Ezra shrugged. "Betrayal is such an ugly word. I prefer opportunity." "What do you want with her?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Ezra's eyes flicked to Jake, and for a moment, he seemed almost amused. "It's not just about her. It's about what she represents. Her abilities, her energy. They're the key to unlocking technologies your tiny human brain can't even begin to comprehend. We're talking power beyond imagination." Lyria straightened, her glowing eyes narrowing. "You're working with the Xoreth, aren't you?" Jake's stomach dropped. "Wait, what?" Ezra laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "I wouldn't call it working with. It's more of a partnership. The Xoreth want control of the galaxy. We want the power to ensure humanity is never under anyone's thumb again. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." "You're insane," Jake said, gripping his crowbar tighter. "You think you can trust them. They'll destroy you the second they get what they want." Ezra's smile faded. "Perhaps, but I'm willing to take that risk. The alternative is waiting for them to destroy us first." Lyria stepped forward, despite her obvious exhaustion. "You are playing with forces you don't understand, Ezra. The Xoreth will not honor your deal. They will enslave your people, just as they have countless others." Ezra's gaze hardened. "Spare me the lecture, alien. I've made my choice, and now it's time for you to make yours." He gestured, and more wardens emerged from the shadows, their weapons trained on Jake and Lyria. Jake's mind raced. They were outnumbered, and Lyria was too weak to use her powers effectively. He had to think fast. "Fine," Jake said, raising his hands. "You win. Take me, but let her go." "Jake, no," Lyria protested, but he shot her a warning look. Ezra chuckled. "Touching. But you're not exactly a valuable bargaining chip, are you?" "Maybe not," Jake said, taking a step closer to Ezra. "But I'm all you've got. You think she's going to cooperate if you kill me?" Ezra studied Jake, his expression unreadable. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Little of both," Jake said, his voice steady. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension so thick it felt like the air itself might shatter. Then, in a blur of motion, Jake swung the crowbar at a nearby control panel. Sparks flew as the machinery short-circuited, and the room plunged into darkness. "Run," Jake shouted, grabbing Lyria's arm and pulling her toward the nearest exit. Chaos erupted. The wardens fired blindly, their shouts echoing through the darkened chamber. Lyria stumbled, but Jake held her steady, guiding her through the maze-like corridors of the outpost. "You're insane," she said, her voice breathless but tinged with admiration. "Yeah, well, it's growing on me," Jake replied. As they ran, the faint hum of energy grew louder. Lyria suddenly stopped, her eyes widening. "My ship," she said. Jake followed her gaze to a large, circular door at the end of the corridor. "Your ship's here." "Yes," Lyria said, her voice urgent. "But we must hurry. The wardens won't be far behind." Together, they pushed through the door, revealing a sleek alien vessel that pulsed with the same blue light as Lyria's energy. Jake couldn't help but stare. "That thing actually flies." Lyria gave him a tired smile. "Barely. but it will get us out of here." They climbed aboard, and Lyria immediately began activating the controls. The ship hummed to life, its interior lighting up with a soft, otherworldly glow. As the engines roared, Jake looked out the viewport and saw Ezra standing in the doorway, his face a mask of fury. "This isn't over, Miller," Ezra shouted, his voice barely audible over the sound of the engines. Jake smirked. "It's never over." With a surge of power, the ship lifted off, leaving the outpost, and the wardens far behind. Into the stars, the ship shot through the atmosphere like a blazing comet, leaving Earth and its chaos behind. Jake pressed himself into the co-pilot's seat, gripping the edges as the craft trembled violently. Panels flickered, alien symbols danced across the controls, and warning sounds blared in a language he couldn't understand. "This thing feels like it's about to fall apart," Jake shouted over the noise. Lyria's hands moved with practiced precision, her fingers glowing faintly as they danced across the controls. "It is holding together," she said, though her tone wasn't entirely convincing. "Barely." The turbulence eased as the ship broke free of Earth's gravity and entered the vast, star-speckled expanse of space. Jake exhaled, his knuckles white from gripping the seat. "I can't believe I'm actually in space," he said, staring out the viewport. The sight was breathtaking. A sea of stars stretching endlessly, with nebulas swirling in shades of blue and purple. Lyria glanced at him, her expression softening. "It is beautiful, isn't it? Your first journey beyond your world." Jake nodded, momentarily forgetting the chaos they'd left behind. But the moment was short-lived. The ship jolted, and a sharp alarm echoed through the cabin. "What now?" Jake asked, his voice tinged with panic. "Tracking beacon," Lyria muttered, her brow furrowed. "The wardens must have placed it on the ship during their search. They're following us." Jake's stomach sank. "Can you disable it?" "I'm trying," Lyria said, her hands flying over the controls. "But the signal is encrypted. It will take time." As she worked, the ship's proximity sensors blared. A holographic display appeared, showing two sleek, black ships closing in fast. "They're already here," Jake said, his voice low. Lyria's eyes flashed with determination. "Then we will outrun them." The ship's engines roared as Lyria pushed the throttle to its limit. The stars blurred as they hurtled forward, the pursuing ships hot on their trail. Jake clung to his seat, feeling the ship strain under the pressure. "You call this barely holding together?" he shouted. "This is nothing," Lyria said with a faint smirk. "You should see what it can really do." She pressed a sequence of symbols, and the ship surged forward with a sudden burst of speed. The pursuing ships struggled to keep up, their laser blasts missing by inches. Jake's eyes widened as a swirling vortex appeared ahead. "What is that?" "A jump gate," Lyria explained. "A passageway through space. Hold on." The ship hurtled into the vortex, the cabin filling with blinding light. Jake's stomach churned as the sensation of falling overwhelmed him. Then, just as suddenly, it was over. The ship emerged into a new sector of space, far from their pursuers. Jake let out a shaky breath. "Please tell me we're safe now." "For the moment," Lyria said, though her voice was heavy with exhaustion. "But the wardens will not give up easily. We must keep moving." Jake glanced at her, noticing how pale she looked. "You're running on fumes, aren't you?" Lyria hesitated before nodding. "The jump drained what little energy I had left. I need to replenish it." "How?" Jake asked. Lyria gestured toward a compartment on the ship's wall. "There is a chamber designed to amplify my energy. It will take time, but it's necessary." Jake nodded, standing up. "Go. I'll figure out the rest." "You?" Lyria raised an eyebrow. "You barely understand how this ship works." "True," Jake admitted, "but I'm good with machines. Just tell me what needs fixing, and I'll handle it." Lyria studied him for a moment before giving a small nod. "The reactor is unstable. If it fails, we'll lose all power. Keep an eye on the diagnostics and ensure the core temperature doesn't rise too high." "Got it," Jake said, even though he wasn't entirely sure he did. As Lyria entered the energy chamber, Jake turned his attention to the control panels. The alien symbols were incomprehensible at first, but he quickly realized that some of them followed patterns similar to human engineering. He navigated through the diagnostics, his mechanic instincts kicking in. The reactor's core temperature was climbing steadily. Jake grabbed a nearby toolkit and pried open a maintenance hatch. Inside, he found a maze of glowing circuits and conduits that pulsed with blue energy. "Okay, Jake," he muttered to himself. "You've never fixed an alien spaceship before, but how different can it be?" He identified a damaged conduit that seemed to be causing the overheating. Using a combination of tools and improvisation, he managed to stabilize the flow of energy. The reactor's temperature began to drop, and the alarms quieted. Jake wiped his brow, feeling the surge of pride. "Still got it." The ship hummed softly, a sign that the repairs were holding. Lyria emerged from the chamber, her glow brighter and her steps steadier. "You stabilized the reactor," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. "Yeah," Jake said with a grin. "Guess I'm not completely useless." Lyria smiled, a rare and genuine expression. "You are more resourceful than I expected. Perhaps the prophecy chose well after all." Jake shrugged, though her words warmed something inside him. "Let's not start the chosen one talk again. Just tell me what's next." Lyria's expression grew serious. "Next, we find allies. There are others across the galaxy who oppose the Xoreth. If we are to stand a chance, we must unite them." Jake nodded, determination hardening his features. "All right, let's do it. Where do we start?" Lyria turned to the navigation console, entering coordinates. "The nearest system with potential allies is Kalairos. But be warned, Jake, it will not be easy. Trust is a rare commodity in these times." Jake smirked, leaning back in his seat. "Easy's overrated anyway." The ship surged forward, disappearing into the stars. For the first time, Jake felt a spark of purpose, a sense that maybe he wasn't just a nobody after all. The battle for Lyria's world. The ship descended through the dense clouds of Lyria's home planet, Tirana. The atmosphere shimmered with hues of gold and silver, painting the landscape below in ethereal light. What Jake saw was both breathtaking and heartbreaking. Towering crystal spires that once stood proudly were now reduced to jagged ruins. Smoke curled into the sky, and the ground was scarred by the unmistakable marks of battle. Lyria sat in the pilot's seat, her hands clenched around the controls. Her usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a mixture of sorrow and fury. "This is worse than I feared," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. Jake leaned forward, his eyes scanning the devastation. This is your home." "Yes," Lyria replied, her voice heavy with emotion. "Once it was a place of peace and beauty. Now it is a battleground." Jake felt a pang of guilt. He had no connection to this world, yet the sight of its destruction felt personal. He turned to Lyria. "What's the plan? How do we stop this?" Before Lyria could answer, the ship's sensors blared. A swarm of Xoreth ships appeared on the horizon, their sleek, black designs bristling with weapons. "They've seen us," Lyria said, her voice sharp. "Hold on." The ship banked hard as she maneuvered through the oncoming barrage. Explosions lit up the sky as enemy fire streaked past them. Jake gripped the edges of his seat, his heart pounding. "Any chance we can talk our way out of this?" he joked, though his voice betrayed his fear. Lyria shot him a look. "The Xoreth do not negotiate. They conquer or destroy. There is no middle ground." "Great," Jake muttered. "Just another day in paradise." Lyria's ship weaved through the chaos, returning fire with bursts of concentrated energy. Her piloting skills were unmatched, but the odds were overwhelming. Just as it seemed they might be outnumbered, a sudden wave of bright energy surged through the sky, slicing through the Xoreth ships. What was that? Jake asked, wide-eyed. Reinforcements, Lyria said, her tone lightening with hope. From the clouds emerged a fleet of Tirana's remaining defenders. Their ships, though fewer in number, glowed with a powerful energy that seemed to hold the Toreth at bay. A transmission crackled over the comms, and a stern voice filled the cabin. Lyria, you've returned. Lyria's expression softened. Yes, Commander Talon, and I brought help. The voice hesitated. A human. This is your chosen one. Jake raised a hand awkwardly, though he knew no one could see him. But yeah, that's me. Hi. Talon's tone was skeptical. We shall see if your prophecy holds merit, Lyria. For now, let us focus on the task at hand. The Tiranan fleet rallied around Lyria's ship, forming a protective barrier as they descended toward the capital city. On the ground, the scene was even grimmer. Soldiers fought desperately against waves of Soreth warriors, their grotesque forms towering over the battlefield. The ship landed in a fortified courtyard, and Jake followed Lyria out into the chaos. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. Talon, a tall Tiranan with an imposing presence, approached them. We're holding the line, but barely, Talon said. The Xoreth are relentless. Their leader, Xylar, commands from above. If we don't take out his flagship, we won't last much longer. Lyria nodded. Then we take the fight to him. Jake and I will infiltrate his ship. Talon looked at Jake, skepticism etched into his features. This human, against Xylar. Jake bristled. Look, I'm not exactly thrilled about it either, but if it means stopping these guys, I'm in. Lyria placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. He has proven himself to Talon. Trust me. Talon hesitated, then nodded. Very well. But if this fails, we're all doomed. The infiltration. Under the cover of the Tiranan fleet's assault, Jake and Lyria approached Xylar's massive flagship in a stealth craft. The ship was a monstrosity, its black hull pulsing with an eerie red glow. As they docked in a hidden entry port, Jake's nerves threatened to get the better of him. You sure about this? He asked. No, Lyria admitted, her eyes serious. But we have no choice. Inside, the ship was a labyrinth of dark corridors and glowing organic walls. Jake followed Lyria, his crowbar replaced by a plasma weapon Talon had insisted he carry. We need to reach the core, Lyria whispered. If we can disable their energy source, it will cripple their fleet. The journey was harrowing. Soreth soldiers patrolled the corridors, their insect-like forms blending with the ship's eerie interior. Lyria used her energy to cloak them from sight, but each step drained her strength further. When they finally reached the core, Jake's jaw dropped. The massive, glowing sphere pulsed with red energy, sending waves of power through the ship. Okay, Jake said. How do we shut this thing down? Lyria stepped forward, her hands glowing as she prepared to overload the core. I'll channel my energy into it, but it will take time. Time we don't have, Jake said, spotting Soreth soldiers converging on their position. He raised his weapon, firing at the advancing enemies. The blasts lit up the room, but the Xoreth were relentless. Jake fought desperately, protecting Lyria as she focused on the core. Almost there, Lyria said, her voice trained. Jake gritted his teeth, his body screaming in protest as he fought off wave after wave of attackers. Just as the Xoreth seemed poised to overwhelm them, a deafening roar filled the room. The core exploded in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves through the ship. Lyria collapsed, her energy spent, and Jake barely managed to catch her. We did it, she whispered, her voice faint. The ship began to shake violently, alarms blaring. Jake hoisted Lyria over his shoulder, sprinting toward their escape craft. As they launched away, the flagship erupted in a massive explosion, taking the Xoreth fleet with it. Aftermath. Back on Tirana, the remaining defenders cheered as the skies cleared. Jake stood beside Lyria, both of them battered but alive. You did well, Talon said, addressing Jake. Jake managed a tired smile. Not bad for a human, huh? Lyria looked at him, her expression filled with gratitude. You're more than just a human, Jake. You're a hero. Jake shrugged. Let's just call it a team effort. But deep down, he knew his life had changed forever. The unthinkable decision. The victory on Tirana was hard-won, but the scars of battle lingered everywhere Jake looked. The once beautiful world, with its crystalline spires and golden skies, now bore the heavy marks of war. Smoke still curled from distant battlefields, and the Terranan people worked tirelessly to rebuild their shattered cities. Jake stood on a high platform overlooking the capital, the wind tugging at his jacket. Below, survivors and soldiers alike moved with a quiet determination. For the first time since arriving on this alien world, Jake felt something he hadn't in years, a sense of belonging. Lyria approached him, her glow restored but dimmer than usual. She had pushed herself to the brink to destroy the Xorith fleet, and though she tried to hide it, Jake could see the toll it had taken. You're brooding, she said, stepping beside him. Just thinking, Jake replied, his voice heavy. We won, but at what cost? Your world's in ruins. And the Xorith, they'll come back, won't they? Lyria nodded solemnly. Eventually, yes. They are relentless, but this victory has bought us time. Time to rebuild. Time to prepare. Jake glanced at her, his expression conflicted. And me, what happens now? Do I just go back to Earth and pretend none of this happened? Lyria hesitated, her violet eyes searching his face. That is for you to decide, Jake. But there is another option. Jake turned to face her fully. What do you mean? Lyria gestured toward the horizon, where a massive ship, the Ark of Tirana, hovered in the sky. It was a symbol of hope, a vessel meant to carry survivors to the stars in search of allies and a new home. The Ark will leave soon, Lyria said. It will carry my people to the distant corners of the galaxy, seeking help to rebuild and resist the Xorith. You could come with us. Jake blinked, surprised. Me? On that thing? What would I even do? You would fight, Lyria said simply. You would be a symbol, a human who stood with us in our darkest hour. The prophecy brought you here for a reason, Jake. Perhaps it's not finished with you yet. Jake turned back to the view, his thoughts racing. The idea of leaving Earth behind forever was both thrilling and terrifying. He had spent most of his life feeling like a nobody, a guy stuck fixing other people's problems. But out here, among the stars, he had been part of something bigger. You make it sound so simple, he said finally. But it's not. If I stay with you, I'm giving up everything. My home, my life, my humanity. Lyria stepped closer, her voice soft. And if you return to Earth, what will you have? Will you truly be happy knowing what lies beyond your world? Knowing that you were meant for more? Jake didn't answer right away. The weight of her words pressed down on him, and he felt torn in two. The farewell ceremony. The next day, the Terranan people gathered in the ruins of the capital for a ceremony honoring those who had fallen in the war. Lyria stood at the center of the gathering, her presence commanding yet humble. She spoke of sacrifice, resilience, and hope, her words inspiring those around her. Jake stood in the crowd, watching her. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, strong, compassionate, and unwavering in her determination to protect her people. As the ceremony ended, Lyria approached him. The Ark departs at sunset, she said. Have you made your decision? Jake took a deep breath. Yeah, I have. Lyria's expression was unreadable. And I'm staying, Jake said. But not with you. I'm going back to Earth. For a moment, Lyria looked as though she might argue, but then she simply nodded. I see. It's not that I don't care, Jake said quickly. I do. But Earth, it's my home. And I can't just abandon it. If the Xorith ever come for my planet, Someone has to be there to fight back. Someone has to warn them, prepare them. Lyria studied him, her gaze softening. You are braver than you realize, Jake Miller. The prophecy spoke of a flawed but courageous human. I see now that it was right to choose you. Jake smiled faintly. Guess I'm not a total screw-up after all. The parting gift. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Ark began to ascend, its massive engines lighting up the sky. Jake and Lyria stood at the edge of the platform, the wind whipping around them. Lyria held out a small glowing crystal. Take this, she said. It's a piece of Tirana, infused with my energy. It will guide you when the time comes. Jake took the crystal, its warmth spreading through his hand. What do you mean, when the time comes? Lyria smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. You'll know. Until then, remember this. You are not alone, Jake. No matter how far apart we are, our fight is the same. Jake swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. Goodbye, Lyria. Goodbye, Jake, she said. May your courage light the way. The Ark disappeared into the stars, leaving Jake standing alone under the vast expanse of the galaxy. He clenched the crystal in his hand, a small but powerful reminder of what he had become and what he still had to do. As he turned back toward the remnants of the Terranan city, a faint smile crossed his face. His journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning.